Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I have the very gorgeous, I'm not going to pronounce your surname, Tami, so I'm just going to say Tami, and you're going to say your surname.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tami Goulet.
Thank you, because I always, when I type it up, I've got the T's, so I have to phonetically pronounce it as I'm typing it. I didn't want to look like a goober. Tami is with us today because she has recently completed the 6-week intensive, and we had our wind-up call last week, and today I want to share with everyone Tami's success, because truly there have been some pretty amazing sessions that we've had in that time. Now, we did do the standard 6, and we had one sort of breakaway session that was also beneficial, but it was pretty much just the 6 sessions. And I guess my first question for you is, what was your expectation going into the 6-week intensive? Now, I know that you had been wanting to work with me for a while, so I reached out to you when I devised this program, and you pretty much jumped on it, and I'm kind of happy that you did. Thank you. What did you hope to achieve in that 6-week period?
Well, one, I'm extremely pleased that you reached out to me, and 2, I am very glad that I jumped on it as well, because while I didn't quite know what to expect within a 6-week period, because past history and working with people has dictated that 6 weeks, while you get some improvements, you don't really, it honestly didn't feel enough to me. But I knew that no matter how far we got, I would still be further ahead than I was when I started.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be beneficial. So regardless of whether, I felt like I conquered the world, or whether I got clarity on 1, 2, or 3 items, I was pleased to proceed with the 6 weeks, regardless of what the outcome was.
Yeah. Okay. And you actually did have some pretty spectacular outcomes. I've got some pretty pivotal moments in mind, but I'd rather hear it from you.
Oh boy. When I first came on, I've been on my spiritual journey for probably not even a year, but it's been a very fast and furious type journey, which has been awesome. But I've also been very open to it, and allowed and surrounded myself with my tribe and the people who I needed to be able to help me with that. So that has definitely helped. But when I still knew that there was something that I wasn't quite getting or clicking. And when I first came to you, I was, I'd say, overwhelmed. I have some medical issues that I'm in the midst of healing, but because of those medical issues, involve insurance companies and stuff, it sort of puts a bit more burden on someone, because the number of people you have to work with to satisfy the expectations and the requirements are huge. So I was just feeling very overwhelmed, and I was feeling very put upon, I guess is probably the best way I can put it.
I think the phrase that you used in our first session was, "My time is not my own."
Yes.
As opposed to a statement that you made at the end of, I think it was our last session, which was along the lines of, "I'm in control of my time."
Yes, very much so.
Which is...
It's a complete 180.
Yeah.
And it's not like I've given up anything. So it's more just the chaos and the chaotic feeling have dissipated.
Yeah. And I guess, Tami, you see, for me, like you know what my abilities are, what my beliefs are, and all of the rest of it. But the thing that I really try and get through in a lot of these sessions is the practical reality of day-to-day life, to try and merge those two lives together. You know, you are an ordinary person living an ordinary life, capable of extraordinary things. And to sort of, to be able to impart just those little snippets that kind of help with just the day-to-day stuff that we go through as people, that, I mean, we were speaking just before this, that you've applied again, even though we've formally stopped working together. And it's those things, it's the practicalities that kind of keep you on track once all the healing has taken place, the major healing, I should say.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a bedrock to come back to.
And I remember when you first said that to me, you're a human living, you're an ordinary human capable of extraordinary things.
Yes.
And I would be so frustrated with that. I'd be like, well, I don't want to be an ordinary human. I want to be supernatural. I want to be this. And after working with you for the 6 weeks and implementing, not workarounds, but things that work for me.
Yes.
Things that I can fall back on, that are innate, like they're innate in me, that you help me pull out. You help me figure out how I learn. You help me figure out that I'll do something for 3 days in a row and then I won't need to do it anymore. And rather than me saying life got in the way and I failed because I wasn't able to do it on day 4, I am now able to say life is continuing. I'm able to flow again. I don't need that right now, but I know where it is if I need to come back to it.
And that is so powerful on so many levels. You know,
my God, yes.
The part of not beating yourself up is that's huge. You know that can't stand it when people do that to themselves. And to be able to understand why you're stopping and starting something and why you need something and then you don't need it, and being able to look at that realistically and just kind of go, well, okay, well that worked. That's great. Thank you. I'm now at a space where I can move forward.
Exactly.
You know, rather than going, oh, I started that and I didn't finish it, and oh my God, I never finish anything. Horrible, 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 horrible. Can't stand that.
And it is so true, and that was definitely something I was doing, right? It's like, oh, I need to meditate every day. Well, says who?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was something that I was forcing or implementing on myself, that I was saying, I need to do this every day. Well, what if I can't do it? Then I beat myself up. So now it's like, nope. And there are days where I pulled up my to-do list again today because I know when I need it, when I sort of have a thought that comes in my head, I'm going, oh, I got to remember that. I go to remember it and I forget it. And then I'm like, oh, okay, the next time I remember it, I got to write it down on my to-do list. So that's when I pull it out. So I know myself much better. I know the tools and the tricks to help me continue to be able to move forward without beating myself up as an ordinary human living in an extraordinary life. Because I also realized throughout these 6 weeks that I am always connected. I may not always trust what's coming in. Is it me? Is it them? You know, but
and that's always going to be a work in progress.
Yeah. And that's sort of where I've come to, but I've noticed that even when I used to go, oh, I'm not connected anymore because I don't feel it. And it's now I just sort of go, yeah, I know, you're still there. And it will be instantaneous where I'll think that thought, I'll acknowledge that they're still there, and some sort of synchronicity will happen right then and there.
Yeah. And
it's awesome. I am the same, but I am so different.
Yeah, and you know, I was just thinking, you know, we're talking a lot about the practicalities of it, and we haven't really talked about, you know, the in-depth healing that took place. And that's always interesting to me because here's the interesting part. Once that deep healing has taken place, it's almost like you don't really have to refer to it anymore.
No.
Because I'm telling you right now, the only thing I can remember, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Is a Blue Gumby. And that actually was a really powerful outcome. If I may share with.
Absolutely.
So we I think it was it session 6? I think it was actually the last session.
It was.
We actually delved into your fear and what your fear looked like, and you described it to me. Would you mind if you described the fear that you were experiencing?
The Blue Gumby fear?
No, the one before.
The other one. Okay. So I would feel a fear, and it would feel dark and slimy and overpowering, and I can see myself cowering in a corner, kind of like, no. And as I was talking to you about fear, I was saying, oh, I'm bringing fear along with me because, fear doesn't, I've externalized it out of myself so that it wouldn't control me. And that fear was my Blue Gumby. And you were fine with my Blue Gumby coming along with me, holding hands and moving forward. But the fear that we uncovered underneath that was part of a cycle, a repetitive cycle that has shown up in my life many, many times, and started with my biological father, was very, very different. And it was very dark and slimy. Like, picture the movie Ghost, and the bad guys going slimy down, going into being taken down in the sewers or whatever. It was that kind of imagery that would come into my head. And we addressed it. I don't want to say you forced me to see it, but
it did.
You did. You forced me to see it. You forced me to bring it to the light. And I guess I didn't want to bring it to the light because I didn't know how to heal it. We had healed a huge part of what had happened to me as a child.
That was massive.
That was huge. But I think the fear aspect of it, because it was over and above the events that we discussed, because it was just a constant state in my house, had never really been addressed. And as an adult, you think you've kind of dealt with it, and you sort of brought it to light. And as it was brought to light, it's almost like it dissipated, like it just kind of
Because what I remember, because what we talked about prior to that, because you were saying it was an externalized fear. What we talked about prior to that is, you can't let something go until you own it. And I remember after we had sort of gone through that process of describing that fear, which we identified as your childhood fear, and you said to me, and it was like my little heart was breaking. It was like you said, but do I have to welcome it in now? And I said, well, no, because you've welcomed it and you've let it go. And then I said, so what does your fear look like now? And you went, it's a Blue Gumby. Just like, and the heavens opened and the choir sang. It was a beautiful moment. So I think forever and a day, despite all of the in-depth work that we did, I will forever and a day remember Blue Gumby, and that for me will be the symbolism of absolute success with the work that we did together.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, there is a group. So for those of you who don't know, everyone who is undertaking the 6-week intensive is welcomed into a very small group of people who are undertaking the program as well. Tami, there's not a great deal that goes on in that group, and that's intentional, because the space is very much about accountability, but then it's very, very, very much my favourite part of it about the celebration. So, as I said, there's not much that really goes on there. It's not like the main group, but you know, there is a camaraderie there with everyone else that's going through the program. So, just share a little bit about, you know, what it means and what it feels like to be part of that group and to be able to share in that space.
So when you first sort of introduced this and said there was going to be a group, I was like, okay, couldn't quite figure out how that was going to work, but you know, open, happy to help. And it's been amazing watching the other women who are going through something completely different than me.
Yeah.
But during the weekly calls and in the group, the lessons learned, the comments shared, the celebrations celebrated, we're all gaining knowledge and experience from each other.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I mean, I've watched two women specifically, because they started at the same time as me, transform literally before my eyes. I mean, saw them first week, saw them last week, and I'll continue on the weekly celebration calls. But it's like the difference in them is night and day.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Well, like you know.
Yeah. And that's what I was about to say. I was about to say it's funny because I recognize it, I see it, I feel it, because that's part of what I can do is I can feel the energy and stuff too in a different way. But I can, like, it's just amazing. Yet when you told me to go back and take a look at my first session call, and you told me to go back and take a look at that other call that we had, that it was just two of us on. And I went, why? Okay, sure. I was speechless. Seeing the woman, I was sitting there talking, knowing it was me, sort of feeling the feelings that were there, but looking at them from a very, very different perspective. They
weren't yours anymore. There was, even when you were talking about your fear earlier, when you were describing it, I wanted to interrupt and say it has no hold on you anymore.
No, it really doesn't.
It's like you couldn't remember how to describe it. That's how far gone it is.
Yep. Yep. I remember asking if I had to bring it in, and I remember feeling worry, fear, and concern over that, because I'm like, I don't want that thing in me. But if that's what was needed, then I was going to do it. But just it's when I first came to you 6 weeks ago, God, I was looking for clarification, clarity, guidance. I don't know. I don't really even know exactly if I knew exactly what I was looking for. And what I got from it was something, honestly, that I didn't expect to happen, which is the quiet confidence and the ability to just sit back and, yep, this is who I am. I'm happy with her. I know I've still got a path to go, and I've got a path I'm loving walking, and I don't need to shout it anymore. It's unbelievable, the difference in my confidence and my growth, in my acceptance.
Yeah. And I said to you, when you said to me last week about the quiet confidence, was to me, it's almost like the ultimate goal, because once you have that, there is virtually nothing that can rock your boat ever again. You know, and then you underpin that with strategies that you know work. You underpin that even further with a deep knowledge of how you work. And there they go. I was waiting for them.
Sorry.
It's all right. And with that, it's, of course we all have bad days, but with those core elements, those key elements, there's nothing you can't work through. And we talked about, you possibly needing to have more sessions, and I kind of went, yeah, no, not going to happen. Because I knew at that stage that you had all the tools that you could ever possibly need to get you through virtually any situation. And if you didn't have the tools, you knew how to go about getting them.
Yeah.
It is that quiet confidence. It is that knowledge of self and that understanding of self that leads you down the paths that are going to give you the best outcome for you. And to me, that's really important, the best outcome for you. Yeah. And that's what you actually see differently as well. It's not the best outcome full stop, it's the best outcome for you. And being able to see that as well, huge.
Yes. And it's funny because I think also when I first came here, it was like, well, I want this ability and I want that ability and I want this and I want that. And what they say, and I find it really true, is when you really want something, like you feel like you're lacking it, the lack shows up even if you actually have it. That's what you see. And now it's just like, more stuff coming in. I know it is, and I'm just letting it come in, and I'm not like, oh, is it going to be this? It's going to be that. It's more just, come on in. Yeah. Introduce yourself.
Yes.
Let me know, and I'm good.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Tami, we have talked a lot about, what you got out of it and the fact that you are a very different person, yet still the same in so many ways. And I guess for me, it's always, and it absolutely is an honour to work with people, even over a 6-week period. But, some of the sessions that we did have were hugely intense. We never left anything undone, though. There was, and I think this is really important for people to understand, is that the aspect of healing that takes place is we don't just go in, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and it's not always direct either. We could be talking for 40 minutes and then it's like, bingo, there we go. That's what we need to focus on. And then we spend the rest of the time clearing that. And I think for me, the beauty of it is that even though it was, 6 sessions, each of those sessions was a standalone healing in itself. That then you literally leave that shit behind.
Mm-hmm.
You can then move forward. And then there's another thing to deal with the following week. But, and as I said, we got to the end of the 6 weeks and it was like, you don't need me anymore. If you do, it's just as a security blanket, which I think is adorable and wonderful, and thank you for that. But you don't, you actually don't need me anymore. And to me, that's the hallmark of me doing my job well. When someone doesn't need me anymore, it means I've done what I needed to do. So, Tami, I want to thank you for taking up the offer of the 6-week intensive. And I want to thank you for doing this interview as well. We have done one before we even worked together. We only had a couple of sessions and you wanted to do one. And now the experience of, what 6 weeks can do for your life, and you've gone through that, all the more power to you. And I do look forward to you continuing with us in the group.
Absolutely.
While I still write the program, which is being written as we speak.
And I'm fine with you having not the program done, because as I mentioned, doing the 6 weeks is very intensive and it's very emotional. All emotions, elation, release. I mean, there was one session where I was bawling and swearing and stuff, and the follow-up that let me just talk about that for a second, because My experiences with my biological father, I've dealt with throughout the years. I dealt with, as you know, right after I sort of came out and told everybody what had happened. I dealt with it as a teenager as I was going through things and with therapists. I dealt with it as a new mom, again, with therapists. I dealt with it as I became older and, you know, was growing up and had kids that were growing up. So I've dealt with it on many different levels and layers. And I remember talking to you about it and saying, oh no, I'm fine, I've dealt with it. Well,
never say that to me.
no, yeah. To a large extent, on a logical level and an emotional level, top layer, I had dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
I was, I'm a survivor. I like who I am, you know, all of those cliche, you know, where everything happens, blah, blah, blah. But you provided such a caring, loving, open, healing space that I was able to heal the parts of me that were still kind of going, I'm still waiting, I'm here, hello, and that were still coming up at unexpected times. And because I had thought that I had dealt with it, I wasn't really recognizing where they were actually coming from.
Yeah.
And one of them still comes out every now and again because she feels she needs to protect me, and I just thank her very much. Yes, my 10-year-old. And I give her a great big hug and I say, no, it's okay, you know, I've got it. The adult, you know, I've got it. We're good. Thank you very much, but we're good. Go play. And so off she goes. And that was a really, really, really difficult session.
I know.
But even today, talking about it, the emotions that I felt during the session, they're a memory, a very distant memory.
Yep.
And that is part of your awesomeness and your awesome gift that you can do for us.
Thank you.
To be able to release the energies that have been stored in my body for, how old am I? 30 years? Yeah, 35 years? Something like that.
And you know, it's interesting because anyone hearing that might think that it's, you know, a horrible, terrible, traumatic process, and it kind of is, but it's this is not to make light of it, but it's done and dusted in 90 minutes, 2 hours tops.
Yes, it's unbelievable. Yes, it's unbelievable. Just knowing that something I've dealt with and held on to for, let's say, 35 years, because I'm 45, so I was 10, yeah, 35 years, and you know, give or take a few years, something that I've held on to, and I've, you know, it was still like a nugget that was still stuck in there, and I pulled across, you know, pulled everything else off, but that piece was still there. To be able to have that done and gone in a 90-minute to 2-hour period was unbelievable. And then the follow-up care that you provide after. I mean, I know I reached out to you to say, I'm doing okay, but I knew that if I reached out to you to say, I'm really struggling, you would have come right in and said, okay, let's.
In a heartbeat.
Exactly. And because I knew that, I was able to heal more on my own.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm talking about this because I want people to realize the things that you think you can't ever get rid of because you've already dealt with them before with whoever, you haven't dealt with them with Adele.
I do think I almost had that as a tagline on my business card once.
I think you should. Yeah, I was talking to somebody else in the group earlier today, and you commented on it because I guess she's coming up to her sort of 6 weeks, and she was sort of like, and it was the same thing with me. Why do I need to look at my first session? Yeah.
It's actually, I started doing the wind-up calls, which incorporates watching the first session, a long time ago when I first started working with people, because what happens, and it's a beautiful transition, what happens though is you just progress at such a natural pace that you really do leave the trauma of the past behind, that you actually don't have any real cognitive understanding of what you were like before it all started.
No.
And the only way to get that honest to goodness slap in the face reality check of what you were like before is to watch that first session. And getting people to do that, it's never failed. It has never failed for them to come back and go, I had no idea.
Yep.
You know?
And watching that first session actually helped solidify a lot of the
Absolutely.
nigglies that I still sort of had, like, because you just don't realize how far you've actually come, right? Like that, and that quiet confidence really, really settled in place after I watched the session. So.
Fabulous. Tami, I have no idea how long we've been going for because I'm just chatting to you like we're just chatting, as we do.
Like always. Yep.
I do thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do this interview. And again, I thank you for working with me through the 6-week intensive. And I have no doubt that whatever you hope to achieve, you're going to get there. And I'll be cheering you on quietly, confidently from the sidelines.
Thank you.
Really, truly being joyous at your progress and your success.
Thank you so much. And
you.
I think I made you cry at the last session, and those words were said, and I'm about to cry now, but it has been an awesome, amazing, liberating, enlightening experience. It's
awesome, amazing, liberating, and enlightening. That's going to be the title of this interview.
I like that.
Thank you again for your time, Tami. And as always, we'll see you in either of the groups, both of the groups, and and on our very good friend Facebook. Thank you so much, Tami.
Thank you.